Howdy neighbors, welcome to the Homestead today. Here on the back porch we have another episode of Porch Talk today, and today's subject is about living off-grid. And before we get started with living off-grid, today's subject, I want to talk to you just for a minute. If you are not a subscriber, if you would like to help our channel out, a lot of folks ask how they could help us. Simply by subscribing would be a blessing to us. And also, after you hit the subscribe button, a little bell will pop up beside the subscribe. I'll get that right in a minute. And if you'll click that little bell, you'll be notified. You can select all, and anytime we upload videos, you should be notified. There's a little notification feed up there on most people's YouTube page that you would be notified when we upload videos. But anyway, if you hit the like button, to give us a thumbs up, that helps us also. And if you comment, that also helps our videos a lot, and helps us out. And so if you'd like to help, that's the way you can do it. And I want to say a very big thank you to all of our subscribers, the new ones, and we've had a bunch just since last week. And last week's video was about a possible EMP attack, and I don't know if you've been paying attention, but if you watch the news. What I mean by paying attention, some watch different news outlets and some get their news from different sources. But if you've been watching the news, the Fox News channel had a military expert on, who said that one of the things they are very much concerned about, is a possible EMP. There's a lot of folks, and I didn't mention this last week, there's a possibility of solar flares, which could also cause power outages and things. And some are more worried about that than they are the possibility of a rogue nation or some nation attacking us. But the military experts were very concerned about China and possibly even North Korea. And they mentioned launching EMP, and there seems to be a lot of folks interested in that right now. So that is a real concern. Our military is taking it seriously, and from what I understand, they're hardening their assets that they have, trying to develop things and make things stronger and better in case there was an electromagnetic pulse. And so that brings us to today's subject about living off-grid. And people keep asking me, I get comments and emails, because there's so many things we talk about. We've talked about water, we've talked about natural disasters, the virus, you name it, last week EMP. So, what do you prepare for? Well, I say you should prepare for like you're going to go off-grid, okay? And no, we are not off-gridders here. And personally, I would love to be off-grid. And what off-grid means to me is that you are not hooked into the system. You're not hooked into a public water system. You're not hooked into a landline phone. You're not hooked into electricity. Those type of things. It doesn't mean that you don't need outside help or that you don't need outside resources. There's things that you will need, but if electricity failed or the water failed, you would still be able to function relatively normal where you live at and live day by day. And so some say, well, why would you need to even worry about that? Because some have argued last week. I got some emails from folks that argued that said that that's highly unlikely and that we're just scaring folks. And first off, let me tell you, I'm not trying to scare nobody. I am just a Christian. I put my faith in the Lord, and I believe He gives us wisdom and knowledge to help us to be prepared along life's way. And so as He's done it all through the history of the Bible. He guided His people. Not to say that He doesn't help people that don't serve Him, but I can't answer for that. But I know He does guide people that serve Him. And I'm a Christian, and I believe the Bible, and I believe we're in for some rough times ahead based off of the Bible, plus besides what I see now. But as far as whether you had an EMP that knocked your electricity out, or not is really irrelevant, because people lose their electricity every day. Now, I've had people say that it's very rare for them to lose electricity. We're out here in the rural area, and it's kind of a price you pay for living in a rural community, rural area, because we are at the very end of the line for electricity. We're as far south as our electric cooperative goes. As far as I can tell on the map, we are about the last property. There may be one the other that you could argue about which one of us is the furthest, but as far as the way their power lines run and come back around here to where we are, it looks like we're the furthest point on their system. And so occasionally out here in the rural area, we lose electricity. We have lost electricity for as long as, in this area, for as long as a month on more than one occasion. So when I was a boy, oftentimes we lost electricity, but we were set up to where we had outhouses, we had things set up on our place here that we were practically didn't have to worry about being on the grid. We had a way to get water. We had food. We could pretty much, when I was a kid living here, you could say we were off-gridders, but we enjoyed the electricity. Now, as years has progressed, everyone has gotten more and more adjusted to having to have electricity and water. And my question today is, could you survive for some length of time? And I know some of you commented last week that you were on machines and things that help sustain you. And in those situations, you know, they're unique. Everybody has their own unique circumstance, but especially if you have medical condition, that would be very concerning. And I would try my best. And you know, I can't answer to you exactly what to do. You could have a little generator perhaps that would run if you have one of these oxygen machines. Maybe they make those that you could charge up in your car. I see people going around, you know, with those little oxygen machines that are rechargeable, so maybe you could recharge them in your car. Perhaps if an EMP happened, there would be no way to recharge those. So maybe having oxygen tanks, the old-fashioned oxygen tanks, if you have to have oxygen, that is a possibility. You know, just things to think on. Maybe get with your doctor and talk to him about it. Now, he may say, oh, you're just far-fetched possibilities, don't worry about it. But being able to survive off-grid, and yes, you can do it. People can survive off-grid without electricity, without water. Look at Puerto Rico. They had this big hurricane a year or so ago, and you know, just pretty well wiped out that island. And people had to live there without electricity, without running water. And some of the folks, I've had people comment to me, they were prepared. They live there. They know there's hurricanes coming. They were prepared, and they survived and did fairly well. But most of the population was not prepared for a hurricane. If I lived in Puerto Rico, I would have been prepared for a hurricane, because where that sets just looks like Hurricane Alley to me. Where we live out here is what they call Tornado Alley. So we are prepared for tornadoes here. If you live in Oklahoma, anywhere in the state of Oklahoma, in fact, I would say anywhere in Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas, Missouri, Arkansas, Illinois, you had better be prepared for tornadoes. But tornadoes hit every state. Every state gets hit by tornadoes. But I believe every state in the Union of the United States of America gets hit by a tornado occasionally. So, but we definitely do here. In some years we have a record amount of tornadoes. And so being prepared for a tornado in the event, because when a tornado comes through here, we might lose electricity. Even though we wouldn't have a limb blown down from the tornado, we could lose electricity because it will knock the power lines down. You know, might go. We had one here, I think the tornado a year or 2 years ago, this one come through here, and I want to say it was like 70 miles. Now, it upped and lowered, so it didn't set no records, but the total path from where it started to where it ended was over 70 miles. in length, and so it knocked all of those power lines. For several days there were power trucks everywhere around here. A lot of people did without electricity. So for a while you got to be off grid. So you got to look at some things. If you lose electric in the wintertime, can you heat your home without electricity? Now, some folks say, well, you need to prepare something that would last you years down the road. Well, eventually you can get to that point. Nothing wrong with that, certainly, like having wood heat. And if you know where you could cut wood, do you have the ability? Some people physically could not cut wood if they wanted to. So here we heat with propane, okay? Our furnace has to have electricity to operate. So if the electric goes out, our furnace wouldn't operate. Now, I have a generator. For some reason, the electronic control board on our furnace, I've talked to experts and they don't really know why it's doing it, but it thinks it's reverse polarity. No matter which way you switch your cord ends, if you know anything about electricity and polarity, you have a hot and a negative. Well, that reads that that's wrong for some reason. So I had prepared a cord on my furnace, a little cord that I could hook up in an emergency, left it hanging there. I had everything ready, but I had never tested it. So we lost electricity. We had an ice storm come through, and we were without for a whole week without electricity. Well, the first day, it was cold weather. You know, all the way through it was cold weather. But the first day I said, did this all happen? I said, no problem. I'm going to hook up my generator. I had already started it. I knew it was working because I check it every spring and every fall, and I keep stable in it, and I'll run it every once in a while just to keep the carburetors from gumming up, and I've got a pretty good routine with my generator. So I had that one checked off. So I ran a cord in. Well, when I went to power up the furnace with then run it on an extension cord, it kept giving an error message. So there was a problem in my generator, the way that it's the RPMs and stuff. Now, you can get generators and you can get systems that would eliminate that, and I have found out about that since. But what I did was installed a little infrared wall heater, and that wall heater does run off of propane. We have 2 propane tanks. One is what we use all the time. My other propane tank, actually we have 3 propane tanks, but our extras are what I call my strategic reserve. And we have enough propane here that we could probably survive 3 years heating our home, cooking, everything that we do for about 3 years. And every year one of the tanks runs down and I have to have it filled. This year one was empty. The other 2 are still full. The guy come out, he filled the one up. That's all we needed, because we didn't have a very hot winter or cold winter, last year. But we also cook with gas. Our oven will not work because it has electronic ignition. Now, if you plug that into a generator, of course, you could use your oven. We have other means for that. But anyway, the little heater has a pilot light, and it has a little striker thing you push down like you do on your barbecue grill, but you can also push that down and light it with a match. Once the pilot's lit, it does not require any electricity. The pilot puts out millivolts, and it's what operates your heating system. So pretty much doesn't require being on the grid, anything like that. I keep extra thermocouples and things here, just if one went out or whatever, we'd have backup. But since we put that heater in that year, we've never needed it since. But we check that every fall. It's about time now to check that. And so I'll probably be doing a porch talk sometime about supplemental heat, and I may show you that. But nonetheless, being set up. So now we have a backup source of heat. We have backup fuel. We also are planning on buying a wood stove, and the piping and everything that we would need, that we would have wood in the event of a long term. If you have a good wood heating stove, you can also cook off of that stove as well. And I have known people throughout the years that have done that lose electricity. They heated their home with wood. They already had wood cut up. They'll keep wood, out beside their home cut up and ready to go. And they can burn wood in the event they lose electricity, because maybe they're total electric or whatever, or maybe they're gas heat, but they, if they don't have electric, their furnace won't run. And a lot of people like to burn wood occasionally in the winter when it gets really, really cold, and especially around the holiday season. I know a family that they have the mama has a wood cook stove in her home, the old-fashioned wood cook stove. And she doesn't use it but around the holidays. In fact, I know more than one family that does this. And around Thanksgiving, she will cook a meal, and usually on Thanksgiving Day, she will cook food on the old-timey wood cook stove. And their children, family, grandchildren, they just love it. And they all think the food tastes better being cooked on that old-timey stove. But could you survive off-grid if you had to go for a while? And first, you may think of it as, what if I had to go for a 24, 48-hour period? Then maybe, what would I do for a week? And you can expand on what you're doing. Getting back to off-grid, I'd love to live off-grid, I think. I think it would be fun. Here is some problems that I can see by living off-grid. Because over the years we've gotten spoiled and we've gotten soft. One of the things would be, I like air conditioning. Here in Oklahoma, this year we've had a cooler summer than normal, but it seems like it's been a long, hot summer. When I say that, people are going to, in Oklahoma, say, no, it's been a long, hot summer, hotter than normal. But it has not been hotter than normal. It's not been one of our cooler summers, but it definitely has not been hot. We very rarely even hit around 100 degrees. Now, a lot of folks will say, yes, we did, because they talk about the heat index. I talk about the real temperature. But the heat index, we did get many days that we were over 100 when you factor in the humidity and you get the heat index. So we did get warm here, but we did not have as bad as we have. We've had years where it was over 100 degrees real temperature, not counting the heat index, and maybe have 120 or more degree heat index temperature. Now those get miserable and hot. And if you don't have air conditioning, it's very hard to survive. Now, one thing that people that live off grid tell me, and I believe this because when we were children and not having air conditioning, not growing up in that environment, I can believe this is how it was based on my experiences. If you're not used to it, you don't have a problem, so much of a problem as some people would. Like if you start in the springtime, you decide you're not going to have air conditioning, you go through the summer months, you'd be fine. There's Amish not very far from here. And I will be sometime here soon. Me and Josie will be making a run up there. And we do every fall and spend the day. And we'll be doing a video and showing you some things I'm planning on it. I did a little bit of videos last year, but I didn't feel it was enough to make a whole video. But we're planning on it this year. But those people do without air conditioning. And most of them have pole barn type homes up there. And it's different than what you see in some parts of the country. And you'll see it when we do the video, and I'll kind of explain. But those folks are used to not having air conditioning, so they survive fine. But if you ever get used to something, it's very hard. And if you were in the middle of summer and you lost air conditioning, you would have some physical challenges for sure. You might have them anyway, but I do like air conditioning. I like running water. I like being able to take a long hot shower. I love really hot showers, and when I'm achy and tired from working all day, a good long hot shower feels so good. And I would miss some of those things. Some of you that have outside showers, and I know some of you have warm water, you put the water in a tank and it gets warm and stuff, and I understand that, but there's times of the year you wouldn't have that. In fact, when I was growing up, some of the kids that we went to school with had to bathe outside, and some of the neighbors over here had a pond, and they actually went there to bathe. And when it was cold weather in the winter, they didn't bathe as often, and they actually got to smelling because they couldn't bathe like they normally would. I remember coming by on the school bus when I was a kid, and on several occasions, this lady that lived over here on the county road, she's dead now, and the home's all been tore down, but she had a rather large family, and the young ones were outside taking baths in tubs and foot tubs, I call them. And she had the children all out there. I mean, they were totally naked out there outside taking baths. They didn't have running water in the home. And my dad, when he was a young man, said they would oftentimes go to the creek here and take their baths in the creek and enjoyed doing that. So the name of this video is, or our homestead here is Cedar Creek. And well, that's the name of the creek that runs through here. And so you may have grown up with that as well, but I would miss the hot showers. Probably be one of the things. As far as using an outhouse, I know people have composting toilets and there's a lot of modern things to that. I would not mind using an outhouse. Now, it might be rough times when you talk about cold weather in the wintertime. You know, people going out and using the outhouse in the winter. I could say that would be something I wouldn't look forward to either. I asked one of my aunts a while back, I said, Auntie, I said, because she's always talking about when they were off-grid and lived over here, didn't have electricity, didn't have running water, had outhouses, but they talk about the family unity and the good old memories that they had and things, funny things that happened. And they would sleep outside in the summer when it was hot. They would go outside and sleep in the front yard, drag the mattresses off the beds and sleep out in the yard, and just things that they would do, and how it would start raining and they'd have to go in, you know, thunderstorms would come up. But they would tell stories that sounded like such memorable times, like you were living on the Waltons. If you've ever watched the Waltons, you know, it seemed like that was, you know, they had their hardships, but they had a love and a family bond. Or Little House on the Prairie type deal. You know, they went through some rough times. And I know it's all movies, but it made it sound like that. So, you know, and it was reality. A lot of folks, I hope you can hear me over the train there. I hear that train a-coming. She's a-coming around the bend. But, you know, when they had these memories. So I said, Auntie, I said, would you want to go back to that time? Would you, you know, you talk about it and kind of idolize it like a really good time. And she said it was. She said it was a really great time. She said it seemed like people got together, families got together, they spent time together. There was more unity and love among families, and it just things had really changed. But she said, I would not want to go back without the modern utilities. She said, I love having the running water and the air conditioning and things like that, and she wouldn't want to go back to that. One thing, one of my aunts used to take us camping, and well, my dad would take us camping. He had an overhead camper, and he would take us camping, and I'll get to my aunt in just a minute. But anyway, you know, an overhead camper, just you back your pickup under. He had an old GMC pickup, and he would slide it under that camper, let it down. My uncle had given it to him, but it was very primitive. When we went, you didn't have electricity and stuff. He would hook up a battery to operate some of the lights. It had a propane stove. It had a little sink, and it seems like you could hook up to water if you had it, or a tank or something for the water. But it's very primitive. But we had some of the most fun times, and I would sleep outside as a young boy, and if we went to a state park or something like that, I would sleep up on the picnic table. And we later, when my brother got older, they got us a tent, and we would sleep in a dome tent, me and my little brother, and pretty much just on the ground. You know, we later ended up with the sleeping bags and got kind of more modern, but we, you know, Mom would bring us a blanket, and you just lay on the ground, bring your pillow from your bed at home and sleep out there, and it was so fun. We enjoyed that. And my dad one time cooked, well, he didn't just one time, he always, when we camped out, would cook breakfast. But one time in particular, my sister that's just younger than me, a year or two younger than me, she had Dad had fixed breakfast, and he told her she ate her eggs very quick. He had cooked her maybe an egg or maybe 2 eggs, and he fried them over easy. And we loved the way Dad fried eggs. Our mom would not hardly ever cook us an over easy egg. It was always well done, and she said they were too nasty. She would cook them over easy for Dad, but not for us kids. But when Dad cooked eggs, he would fix them over easy, and that's the way we wanted them. And he would fry them in the bacon grease. He would cook bacon and then throw the eggs in there. If you've ever had that, I mean, to me, that's a delicacy. If you're a country boy, especially a southerner, you know what I'm talking about with having your eggs over easy and bacon grease. But nonetheless, my sister wanted another egg, and my dad said, well, first you got to eat your other stuff. Like we had fried potatoes and bacon and stuff. So he said, you eat that and I'll cook you all the eggs you want. And my sister hurried up and ate her bacon and potatoes, and my dad had to start cooking her eggs, and he cooked her over a dozen eggs. And my little sister, 7 or 8 year old, and if you ever seen my sister, she is just still skin and bones, and she never was a big girl at all. Well, she might have put on a little weight when she was having children, you know what's natural, but she's never been what you would consider heavy at all. But what's funny is she ate and ate eggs until Dad ran out of eggs. I mean, my sis probably could have ate 24 eggs that day. And where she put them, I don't know. But she ate them eggs and really enjoyed it. And it seems like things cooked out more natural like that outdoors. We had an old Coleman fuel stove, you know, one of them that you pump the little red tank up, and that's what Dad would cook on when we went camping. And sometimes he would cook like they had an open fire, and I can't remember this particular time if it was actually on an open fire, but I have gone out and camped where we cooked our breakfast on a sure enough open fire. And I just, for some reason, it seems like stuff cooked outside and cooked on an open fire just seems like it tastes so much better. It's a little more work, not as convenient as cooking on your stove, but my dad, when we'd go camping out, some of my best memories is camping out with the family when we were young. Back then, things didn't bother me. Now that I'm older, if I had to sleep on the ground, on the bare ground, would be kind of rough for me. I also used to go on camps, and not very many years back would go on hikes and things and stay all night, or go on a camp and stay and live primitive. And I had a ball doing that. And sometimes we would camp out and just what you had in a backpack's what you survived on. And it live off of MREs. And if you've ever done that, the meal's ready to eat, you know, dehydrated stuff, and just have water, and you have a little pot and heat it up in there if you have that privilege, or just live off of Vienna sausages or sardines and crackers, you know, something like that. But I have had wonderful experiences going off like that in living. So that's kind of a taste of, and the reason I'm mentioning all of this is to give you an idea of what you could prep for if you might have to go off grid, is to think, what would I, if I was going on a camping trip somewhere where there was no modern facilities, what would I have to survive, and how long could I do that? You know, you can go camping and maybe you go Colorado elk hunting, or New Mexico elk hunting, wherever, and you're like, okay, I'm going to be gone a week. So you bring enough supplies to last you a week, because you can't just run to the store. Another experience that I had was my aunt, one of my aunts, would take us camping. And the first time she ever took us camping, we went to a state park, but we got way back in the back area, and where you didn't have like electricity. But we had the toilets you could go use, but we didn't have electric, and things pretty primitive. And my uncle was an ex-military guy, and they had a little shell camper on their pickup, and they would had a mattress rigged up in there, and they would sleep on it, and the kids slept underneath the mattress. But they would pack the camping supplies all in that camper and unload them, and I would sleep outside and sleep on the ground, and I loved it. It was so much fun. But the first time we ever went, it seems like we might have went on a Friday evening, something like that. But we got up there and we were setting up camp and getting everything set out, and my aunt had already cooked supper for us, and I love fried chicken legs. That's one of my most favorite foods, is fried chicken legs. And I'm talking about the old-timey way, southern fried chicken. You know, some of these new batters and some of the stuff that people are doing now, the modern way, and Kentucky Fried Chicken and all that. No, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about home fried, Crisco fried, home fried chicken. And my aunt, boy, she could cook the chicken, and I love chicken legs. And that's all she had cooked, was a big old Tupperware bowl full of chicken legs. And I guess she wasn't concerned if anyone else liked chicken legs or not, but she knew I did. And we ate that for supper, plus all the fixings. My aunt had fix, things like potato salad and coleslaw and different stuff like that. But it was all homemade. One of the best meals I've ever had in my entire life. And I think it was more the atmosphere, probably. Another thing she had, we didn't have much soda pop ever to drink. And so she had brought a cooler or ice chest full of like Shasta brand pop. And used to around here when I was a kid, you could go to Atwood's and get that like a nickel a can or something. Buy a whole, we'd buy a whole flats of that when we were going to go camping. And she had, you could have all the pop you wanted, all the fried chicken that night. I mean, we ate like kings. And the whole time she cooked, she could make tree bark taste good. And she's not living now, but I'll just tell you, I miss her a lot, and I miss her husband also and my uncle. They were just good people to us. As I was growing up, she kind of raised us, and we stayed at her home a whole lot. But going camping and just living off grid was fun, and we had kerosene, Coleman pump up, not kerosene, but Coleman fuel type lanterns that he would light at night, and we would sit outside, and they'd bring some chairs and things, and we'd sit till we just all got so tired we went to bed. But we had such fun times. We'd fish in the lake there, and we would leave our poles out, like go throw your poles out in the morning and come back up and have breakfast and go back and check your poles and put them on forked sticks so hopefully something wouldn't drag it in. And sometimes you would go back and you'd have a catfish on your line, and you would be so excited, and I'd catch a little catfish like that and think I've caught 100-pounder, and I'd want to go back up and show it to my aunt, and it was such fun and memorable times. But living off grid, I went one time on a turkey hunt with my cousin, and we had a policeman here in our community, really nice gentleman, and he was an older like fella, and we loved to turkey hunt, me and my cousin, and he had told us that he had a private place down in southern Oklahoma, and off-grid home thing, and it's been years ago. And you might not think of Oklahoma as being off-gridish, but there's some areas in Oklahoma that you can get off in like you can up in Arkansas and Colorado and stuff. So he told us how to get there, and my dad and my uncle, my cousin's dad, he went with us. The four of us, we went and drove all the way down there, and you had to drive in the woods and on these little trails to get back in there. It was very far, and we get to his cabin, and there is his son is there. So his son says, we're here, and said, I brought a friend with me, and it would be crowded here, but said, there's a guy right down the road here that is a dentist, and he has this cabin, off-grid cabin deal, and said, if you want to go down there, you're welcome to stay there. Said he doesn't mind at all. So we go down there, and there's a note poster thing on the porch that says, you're welcome to stay here, but leave everything like you found it. Don't tear up anything, whatever. Everything's ready to go. It had an old Serval type refrigerator. They had a propane tank there hooked up to it. Had an outhouse hooked up. Had an old well where you could get water. It was so neat back in there that if I was ever able to buy the place, I would love to buy it and be way back in there. But we stayed there, and he had bunk beds and stuff, and it was dusty because there hadn't been a whole lot of people there and had not had the tender care of a female. I don't know if it ever had, but it was very fun. We sat on the porch there early in the mornings, different stuff, and visited throughout the day and ate our lunches and cooked. We just had a wonderful time. We stayed down there a few days, and it was so fun and so neat. So my thoughts are that is one idea of ways that, if you prepared for that. Now, I know if you're living in an apartment complex or in the city, it's going to be, there's challenges. There's challenges if you live in the rural area. We've, right now, a lot of these fires they're having in Oregon and Washington State and in California and other places, just massive fires. Well, you know, if a fire burned through big like that through our area, there is high line power transmission lines and stuff through. So even though we might not would be affected, or we could be, but say we weren't affected by the fire, we could lose electricity for a while. And like I said earlier, we've had tornadoes come through and caused us to lose electricity. There's people around here who's had to do without water for some time. Our town across the river here last year had devastating floods that knocked out utilities and things. The year before that, we had tornadoes come through here and knocked out their power. We even had a funeral over there and had an elderly minister that preached the funeral, and he said it was the first time he had done it in lamplight. Now, the church was an Assembly of God church, a big one, but it was not designed to be used without air conditioning. No, the windows it had, you couldn't open, and it was hot in there. It was summertime, but they had lost electricity to the whole community there, so you couldn't get money out of the bank, you couldn't buy gas there, you couldn't even buy groceries. Nothing was working because it all required electricity. Now, some people were prepared. Also, we had these massive floods last year, and up here, a little town north of me called Braggs, and it was basically just an island, and you were stuck there. You could not drive out. Now, there were some people that brought their boats and would come and meet you at a certain point, and you could get in the boat and they would take you to shore, and there were people that was volunteering to run you to town, but these folks were stuck there. But most of the people that were there, and I have a friend, a real good friend that lives over there, and he lives out in the country, but he said people just got together and we'd meet downtown, and they had big cookouts, and people just bring what was in their freezers and stuff. They lost electricity, so a lot of folks was like, I got to cook up what I got, so they would cook up big meals. They would all gather and meet. Now, the military flew in helicopters, and you could leave by helicopter, but they said they would not bring you back if you left by helicopter. So, but those that were prepared, they went through like nobody's business, and they were without electricity for 2 or 3 weeks, couldn't go anywhere. I forget the exact amount of time, but it was quite some time that they were kind of stuck, and it actually become an island out there. But you can survive if you're prepared. And this friend of mine, him and his family were prepared. And he even had a generator, so he was able to keep his freezers cooling and made, just survived. And so you think about what you can do. One thing, I told you the Amish around here, we have some up north, and one thing, they don't have air conditioning, but they do use fans. And I bought this from the Amish, but you can order these online through Amazon, different places. But DeWalt makes a cordless fan, and you can actually plug a cord into this fan. It's got a place here that you can put a power cord, an extension cord, and plug right in there if you wanted to. But I got this for cordless purposes. And you just put one of your DeWalt batteries. DeWalt makes a smaller battery, then they make the Max battery, and I've gotten some of them. But you can put one of them, even the little thinner battery. This thing ran all night long. We lost electricity, and one of our things is it's very hard here to sleep without a fan. And we actually have fans on both sides of the bed. Josie has hers, I have mine. So, but we're used to that noise, and that little bit of noise, I'm a very light sleeper. Any little old noise wakes me up. And I don't know how I ever got to rest when we camped out, other than I think it's because you were so tired from all the activity that you didn't bother you. But anyway, I do wake up at the slightest sound, so having a fan on helps. Not so much for the coolness, but the coolness is nice, but for that sound. So we lost electricity. I had bought one of these from this one right here from the Amish, had the battery out. I used the batteries in my drills, so I just went out to the shop, got one of those batteries. I could have started the generator, run a cord over to the house. They even have a way I can hook it into my main box. It just takes a little bit. But it was about 10 o'clock at night. We were ready to go to bed. It wasn't that hot. I said, let's try out our fan. And that thing worked really good. They're a little pricey, but for the convenience. Because, if you're not able to get a good night's sleep, that would be a rough thing. They also have fans up there. about the same price, that's a little bigger fans, that you can actually take and it has prongs on it that you can hook on to like a 12-volt battery. So if you had a battery charged up, now I wouldn't want to carry a 12-volt battery in the home, but evidently the Amish sell these to their people for air, and it's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. I just, but for off-grid purposes, this is a good idea to have, and we were able to sleep through the night very, very well. So living off-grid, and I am wanting to experiment with solar electricity and have a solar bank, but I actually want to be where every once in a while we would survive off-grid that way. Now, somebody argued with me on my video that I didn't know what I was talking about last week concerning EMPs, and because I had mentioned that they would knock your solar out. The actual solar panels, that's my understanding, they think they may be okay, but it's the electric wires that connect, and the controllers are very electronic, and there is beliefs that it could knock those controllers out. That you should probably, in case of an EMP, most people that I know that's really into solar believe that you should have your controllers over. This guy said he Googled it, and I was wrong. Well, I was thinking this is kind of funny to say, but I was like, in the event of electric outage, you're not going to have Google. So maybe if you have things written down, and I'm wondering if this guy will be able, if an EMP happens, what will he do then? Will he message Google and say, you were wrong, Google? Not everything you hear on the internet is correct. Not everything that you Google is 100% correct. And so, you know, there's a lot of, with EMPs, losing, or any kind of EMP, any kind of electrical outages, there's a lot of ifs, ands, and buts about what could possibly happen. But as homesteaders, as preppers, you know, they say you can live 3 minutes without air, you can live 3 days without water, and 3 weeks without food. Now, some, you know, I know there's some that are extremes. Some can hold their breath longer times, shorter times, or all this. But that's kind of what the deal is in threes. You know, if you don't have air to breathe, you're in trouble. If you don't have water to drink, you know, by 3 days, you're probably going to be gone. And 3 weeks without food, you're going to be in bad shape. So being prepared for what lies ahead. I'm also concerned, you know, a lot of things. Our political situation right now, the civil unrest in our country, the saber rattling with China. There's so many things. And so, you know, if you let it and you said, I'm going to try to prepare for each individual thing, you know, it's enough to drive you crazy. And that's not the purpose of this at all. But if you prepared to where if you had to be off-grid for a while, and a lot of folks are going off-grid. There's a lot of people over in Arkansas. There's an area over there that we used to go deer hunting, and we had a deer camp there. And a lot of the people back in there don't have electricity and are very primitive. And they love it. And a lot of them, that's all they've ever known was that way of life. And there are a few folks, even here in Oklahoma, in our area, that are very primitive and are off-grid, you know, and that's the way they want it, and that's the way they live. So, but some folks are going off-grid, and it's by choice. They're going off and doing it because they feel that they're enjoying it, the ones that do. There's Zach, an American Homestead, if you've ever watched him. His wife died some time back, was very sad. We used to just really enjoy listening to both of them, and we really enjoy listening to him still. But he's off-grid. I mean, he's one of the most off-grid. There's some that call themselves off-grid that really aren't, well, in my opinion. And then there's those that really are. And Zach's one that is really off-grid. And what I think you're off-grid. Doug and Stacy, they're off-grid, you know. So if you've ever watched them, Off Grid with Doug and Stacy, I think's what it, or Doug and Stacy Homestead. I'm sorry, but I do watch them. I really do. Some, but anyway, there are people that are off grid, so you can watch those folks and see what they have done. And you may not be able to do it, but I would love to have a solar system set up where we could shut our electric off and test it, test our system out to see if it actually works. You don't know if you don't test it. Some people will take 30 days and not go to the grocery store and test their system. Some folks will turn the power off and see if they can survive for 30 days and test their system, or a week or whatever. So, but just being prepared. So I hope you're prepared. We don't know. I don't know what lies ahead. So I prepare for the worst, and I'm hoping and praying for the best. I know who holds tomorrow, and that's the Lord. And I believe He can keep us through everything if we'll put our trust and our faith in Him first. And the Bible tells us, seek ye first the kingdom of God and His righteousness. That means seeking God and living right for God. Then all these other things will be added unto you. So the first thing is making sure we're spiritually right with God. And then these other things have their place. And the Lord always directs His people and shows them what to do. I appreciate you watching today. May God richly bless you for today. Appreciate you watching this episode of Porch Talk. We air it every Tuesday night at 7 o'clock. Hope to see you next week. We're gone.